KOF 15 is a great game, one of the best installments of the franchise, but it has the potential to be much better if some issues were addressed and other improvements were implemented. Here I gathered 7 ideas that, if materialized, could transform KOF 15 from a great game to a masterpiece. This one is a given in all fighting games from this day and age. More characters are bound to join the roster in the future. KOF 15 surpassed its predecessors by offering these DLC characters bundled as whole teams, a wise decision that takes the identity of KOF into account. The initial roster was good, but it was, and still is, missing key figures of the franchise. It's true that my personal favorites had already joined the roster, we still want the rest to follow. Kim is still the biggest absent of KOF. He needs to come back at some point with brand new physics-respecting pants, ideally with fan favorites Mei Li and his best friend / rival Jun. Vice and Mature are also missing, which is a big shame since their sweetheart of a boss, Rugal, had returned, and while at it, why not put them in a team with their other boss, Genetz? We haven't seen that guy in a long time, and he would fit perfectly in a team with those two, as well as an optional boss in the challenge mode. I personally miss Mature a lot. She is one of my mains in previous games, and I love her fighting style. I can't even imagine what sick combos she could do with 15's gameplay mechanics. As I mentioned in a previous video, the Tales of Ash Saga's characters are underrepresented in 15, with only 2 characters, Ash and Elizabeth. Other fighters from that arc would certainly enrich the roster. I'm thinking of the trio, Dulon, Shen and Oswald. All 3 of them have unique fighting styles that don't really resemble any of those of the already existing figures. Okay, maybe Shen and Yashiro share some similarities, but they're still very different from one another. Plus, Oswald was already in 14. All he needs is a little bit of tweaking to his already existing model and he's good to go. But you know what could be even better? Giving us a brand new original character. Capcom did it with Luke in Street Fighter V and even in 4 with DiCaprio, so why not do just that? I'll talk more in details about this matter later in the video. Those are some of the many potential candidates as future DLCs. There are obviously a lot more fan favorites who would be more than welcome to KOF 15. Why don't you tell me which one you want to see down in the comments? If we've been spoiled by a steady release of new characters since the initial launch of the game, the same thing cannot be said about the stages. Only one new stage was added so far, the one that came with Rugal. And although it was a free DLC, which is always a most welcome thing, this area starts to feel pretty lacking in KOF 15. With the addition of the DLC fighters, teams start to share stages between them. The Garou trio have the same arena as the Fatal Fury team, and the Southtown Bad Boys are fought in the Pow Pow Cafe stage, just like the Art of Fighting team. And let's not forget that some stages were already shared between teams from the start, like the aforementioned beach stage that is also the backdrop of K-Dash's team, or the French neighborhood for both the superheroines and the secret agents, though the daytime of these stages change, making them more unique to each team. And that's my point. If you're going to give a DLC team an existing stage, at least change something in it. You could have made the Garou team fight during nighttime in that same beach stage, which could also be considered as a throwback to Jennei's original stage. Change the lighting effect or add some NPCs in the Pow Pow Cafe. It makes a lot of difference when each team has a unique backdrop. It adds a lot to them and helps make them more unforgettable. It's super cool that we have specific theme for each team, but it would have been even cooler if their stages remain unique to them as well. If we're not having new stages, then at least tweak the old ones a bit. You did it before and it worked wonderfully, you can do it again. Another aspect that has always been lacking in KOF is the alternative costumes for characters. It was understandable during the 2D era, where most 2D fighters didn't have this option as well. It was extremely expensive and time-consuming to animate the sprites. An alternative costume could almost be considered as a new character, but with the transition to the third dimension, this is no longer an issue, or at least it's not as problematic as it used to be. That's why most modern fighters offer tons of costumes for their characters, except KOF. For some reason, the series keeps being stingy when it comes to the wardrobe of its many fighters. KOF 14, the first mainline 3D game, did offer alternative costumes, but it was only for some characters. 15 follows this tradition very closely, and that's the problem. Why just some? Why not having at least one alternative costume for each character? The worst part is when some of these lucky fighters turn out to be the least picked ones, like Leona. She has her original attire as an option, but almost nobody picks her, during this patch anyway, whereas the most popular ones are stuck with the same outfit. It's noteworthy that KOF did offer alternative costumes for every character in past games, more specifically the Maximum Impact series, which can be considered as one of its highlights. So I don't understand why the modern mainline entries keep ignoring this feature. It hurts even more when we take a look at the PC version, where players are spoiled by the number of free mods available there. I'm not asking these costumes to be offered for free on console. You can charge us if you want. Some may not like to pay for cosmetic stuff, but most of us would appreciate having the option. In my review of KOF 15, I did say that the game is lacking in terms of single-player content. That's still the case as we speak right now, but in the same time, I can't deny the efforts of SNK to remedy this issue by adding the boss challenge mode, for instance. Even if it only has one boss so far, I'm sure others will be added eventually. Still, the inclusion of other modes would be greatly appreciated. I personally wouldn't mind the existence of a trial or challenge mode. I know that the game already has a trial mode where the player is asked to perform different combos, but I was thinking of something more akin to what KOF 11 had. Honestly, those kind of modes tend to usually frustrate me, but the feeling of accomplishment once they're conquered is priceless. It would also help if these modes offer some kind of rewards, like artworks for instance, which are surprisingly missing from the game. Another thing that would be cool to add is the survival mode that used to be present in most old installments. You pick your favorite character and go against the whole roster one after the other with one single life bar. It's always fun to see how far you could go each time. I missed that mode a lot. One of the things I was hoping for when they announced Rugal as a single character is to fight him in the story mode as a mid-boss. He could be acting like a secret challenger if the player performed exceptionally well during the first matches, like winning with OCVs or finishing the fights with climax supers. This is nothing new in KOF, and old games in the franchise worked exactly like that. Again, KOF 11 is the first to come to my mind with the impressive number of mid-bosses that game had and the conditions to unlock the fights against them. Unfortunately, this is not present in 15, removing any chance of fighting the iconic boss in the story mode. But I have hope that when other bosses join the roster, this possibility will be added in the future. I mean, there is no reason not to, everything is already in place. I remember when the Team Garou was launched, an annoying bug showed up with them, causing the game to freeze more often than I could count. To my knowledge, that bug was fixed thankfully, but there are still some minor issues that need to be addressed. The first is the inconsistent registration of the two punch and kick buttons. Executing a regular special move when you want to do an EX1 can be a decisive matter during a round. It may not sound like a big deal, but when you drop a combo because Kula went with the heavy spinning kick that got blocked and punished when you actually wanted the EX variation that allows to combo and juggle the opponent, it can be really frustrating. I personally never had to deal with this problem because I always map the AC and BD to the shoulder buttons. Yes, I play with a controller, but some players don't use this button configuration and prefer to press those buttons like the old times. Plus, if you're using an arcade stick that has only 4 buttons, you're pretty much screwed. The other thing that needs to be fixed, desperately I might add, is the matchmaking. This was and still is a problem since the launch of the game. Finding someone to fight in the ranked matches still takes forever. It's a huge shame, because it is now that the game is played the most. It's been out only a few months ago, and gamers are eager to brawl online. If this problem persists, then most players will just abandon KOF 15 and go have fun somewhere else, and we don't want that. Of all things that I mentioned in this video, this is by far the most important issue that needs to be solved as soon as possible. In my review, I briefly mentioned how Terry and Ralph needed to be nerfed. I gotta admit, I was so sick seeing Terry, Ralph and Vanessa, which I forgot to add, everywhere when the game launched. Thankfully they are finally nerfed. And the good news, they're still strong, they just cease to be ridiculously unfair as they used to be. Overall, the roster is a lot more balanced now. I was pleased to see how diverse the teams were during Combo Breaker, for instance, but I also realized that some characters still need some adjustments. The first to come to my mind is Rock. His fans may hate me for saying this, but hear me out. I know he was already nerfed, but I think he's still too good. His damage output is too high for someone as fast as him, so that should be probably toned down a bit. Also, I'm not sure if his Far C should stay as good as it is right now. That was Rock, the second character that I personally start to hate actually, and I hate that the game makes me hate her since she is one of my top waifus, is Shurmy. As a grappler, she has way too many anti-air moves. Her crouch C is insanely good. Two of her supers, one of them is a climax, are anti-airs, not to mention her special move Shurmy Clutch. Keeping your distance is what you would do against a grappler, but if they somehow get too close, your most likely reflex is to jump away from them. Good luck doing that against Shurmy. But all that is nothing compared to my biggest problem with her. Why her supers have no damage scaling when executed after a special move. Clark's Super Argentine Backbreaker does a laughable amount of damage if done after a command throw. Meanwhile, Shurmy is having none of that. She hits like a freaking truck all the time, and that's just stupid and unfair to my boy Clark. Hashtag nerf Shurmy. A lot of you told me that Cronen is also getting ridiculously strong with the later patch and needs to be nerfed again, but I don't agree with you on this. I don't play him myself, but I like him as a character. I always rooted for his comeback, even before the game announced it, so it pleases me to see him kicking some butts at last. Let's let him shine for the time being. And the last thing that I think KOF 15 would greatly benefit from its improvement, and I realize that many may not agree with me or just don't care about it, is a story expansion. It's pretty much confirmed that 15 is the last chapter of the amplified Spectre saga, but we can all agree that something doesn't feel right. All other sagas contained at least 3 games, not including the Dream Match entries. There are still questions that remain unanswered. For example, I like the final boss a lot. I think Otoma Raga's design is one of the best in the series, but ultimately we don't know much about her. We also don't know the origins of the powers that Shun'ei and Isla have. Wouldn't it be cool if a third amplified Spectre shows up as a DLC character? Their story would be the perfect opportunity to shed some light to all this matter. If 15 story doesn't have a sequel, then a part 2 is probably all it needs. This part 2 could also take the form of a separate mode dedicated fully to the story, like Street Fighter V, Mortal Kombat, or even KOF 13. Uncovering another side of the story by jumping from a character to another is a proven formula in modern fighting games. Heck, they could even make it a long, unplayable movie, though I'm not very enthusiastic about this last option. Bottom line, KOF had always had a considerable advantage over its competitors in terms of story and lore. Seeing these subjects benefiting from the strict minimum in 15 saddens me. It could have been a lot better. The good news are, it's still time to make KOF 15 story an unforgettable experience, if the developers have the will, that is. And those were the 7 things that, in my humble opinion, would make KOF 15 a masterpiece. I'm sure you have your own ideas for the game as well, and I would love to read what you have to say in the comments. Special thanks to my patrons for their generous support. I hope you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up if you did, and why not consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching.